SVCE staff. Okay, go ahead, roll call.
Great. We're calling this meeting to order. It's 11 a.m. Customer Program Advisory Group, Silicon Valley Clean Energy. I will start with the roll. Donald Lee.
Here.
Peter Evans.
Here.
George Pardon.
Here.
Ryan McIntyre.
Here.
Robert Brewer.
Here.
Sandy Buju.
Here.
Jeff Holman.
Here.
Doug Coons.
Here.
Tara Hernandez.
Here.
James Talea.
Here.
Pamela Garcia.
Here.
Tristan Meacham.
Here.
I will note members Gary Lapshaw, Tara Srikrishnan, and Thomas Klingle are absent.
Do you expect them?
I have not heard from Tara or Thomas Klingle, but I know that Gary will not be present.
Well, we have quorum, so we'll go ahead. So can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar, which is the next from last meeting?
So moved.
Second. Okay, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm abstaining. Any other extensions if you weren't here? Okay. So,
And Chair, if we could have any public comment?
Oh, yes.
Public comment.
so public comment, I'll go with Mr. Barber and ask, is there anyone else from the public that would like to say anything? Okay, so I'd like to introduce Jeff Byron, who is the chair of the Monterey Bay Clean Power. He'll explain your committee, because it's analogous to this one, but not exactly the same, but anyway, he's the chair, and I've also known Jeff for a while, so we didn't conspire. We might start. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, I wasn't planning on saying anything, but thank you, Peter. We did not conspire. I didn't even know you were the chair of this committee when I was elected to the chair of the other. However, I'm here because I want to learn, and we figure you're about 6 or 8 months ahead of us, so we'll certainly take notes from what you've been doing and apply some of those same things to the Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Cruz County CCA.
Can you say a little bit about what the status of that CCA is, and then also say a little bit about what the role or mission of your committee is?
So it's, the status is it launched recently, just in the last couple of months, I think July 1st. In terms of my role, I'll have to be honest with you, I just got back from a 2-day backpacking trip, and I haven't read the bylaws yet, and that's on tomorrow night's agenda. But having watched a couple of the meetings of the board, they have a board and a policy board and an operations board, and now this community advisory council. So there's a lot of input, if you will, at different levels. I've watched some of the other meetings, and they think our community advisory council is going to have an important role, although I just this morning talked to the chairman of the policy board, and it seemed a little bit quieter on in that regard. In other words, make sure you stay in your lane. So we'll be making recommendations to the policy board. I have a feeling that it'll go through the hierarchy, operations, and policy. But to be honest with you, Peter, I have not gotten to the bylaws yet. I decided to take a hike yesterday. I walked out my front door into the beach, and something I've always wanted to do. So I'll just sit here and feel sore.
Are there other advisory boards besides yours?
No.
And you're not just programs, it's basically voices of the community?
Correct. However, I think programs is probably the most important thing, making sure we're getting what the community wants.
And then you have, like, for example, this committee is made up of individuals from each of the member agencies who are nominated. There's a few at-large members, but for the most part, it's people who are nominated by the board member for that agency. So we represent all of the agencies. This committee represents all of the agencies that are part of Silicon Valley. So you have that same kind of makeup.
So I think the way this was done was they sought applications. There were about 60 plus people that applied to be on this advisory committee. Because it's 3 different counties and it's quite a cross-section of communities, they wanted to make sure they got geographical as well as economic and different interests in terms of citizens and business. So I don't know exactly how that selection was done. I read through, however, most all of the resumes, and like this group, was a pretty rich group of individuals. So there's a lot of different constituents that are represented. I think we have 11 members.
I was just going to suggest a quick introduction.
I came here to learn from you.
So Jeff is a resident of Los Altos, perhaps also a resident of the Monterey area.
Yes.
And was very involved in the community of Los Altos with helping to put the CCA to help get Los Altos involved with the early CCA efforts. And also has a long background in the energy industry. Maybe you can just provide a few bullets. Great resource to know here, by the way.
So I would like to be a resource to this group if I can. Thank you, Don. I'm a former California Energy Commissioner, and electricity has been my life ever since I disappointed my dad by not becoming an electrician. I think this is one of the greatest transformations going on, certainly within the state, if not the country in general. Community choice. I hate the word aggregation. I've always called it community choice energy. And that's why I think a group like this is so important, and that's why I decided to get involved and volunteer with the Monterey Bay Clean Power. So again, I'm available. Peter has my contact information. I'll be glad to answer any questions that I can, but also I will stay coordinated with Peter and other members of the community whom I know to make sure that we do communicate. There's no collusion, if you will, that we have to be concerned about.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy came to be largely as a result of the climate action plan, I think. And is that the same for Monterey Bay?
I think it is. I think that's primarily what's driving it. There may be those who also think it's going to save money, but I think that's changed over the last couple of years. This is not really about reducing costs to ratepayers. So I can't tell you for sure. I was not integrally involved in the early formation of Monterey Bay.
Okay. And then I guess, is it PG&E that you're providing taking the generation from, if you will?
Yes.
Replacing the generation?
We are in the PG&E service territory.
Okay. And then are you bound by the same 3 cents a kilowatt hour stranded cost? I can't remember what the acronym is.
PCA.
The procurement charge is different. I think it varies based upon the time of your initiation of your CCA and also the cost of service in those counties that you're taking over. So I'm not sure it's the same number.
Okay. Final question. Don't you have a thermal generation plant in your territory?
Doesn't everybody? Yes.
I don't believe...
The Moss Landing.
Yeah, Moss Landing, that's what I heard.
However, there's been, just in the last month, some announcements on the part of PG&E that they've seen the light and they're going to start looking at energy storage as a replacement for that PG unit. So it's been repowered already once. I think the old Moss Landing plant, the one you see the big smokestacks, those are still in use, but those plants for the most part don't run. There's some combustion turbines in the back that do.
Oh, they're used for peaking purposes? Okay. All right.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And Amy, you're up.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to John for the first part. So yeah, I can.
You can maybe introduce this topic while you're standing up. So actually James asked, and a number of people said that we would like to have this committee, somehow involved in the thoughts about programs coming out of the MOG, member agency working group. So we're actually going to get one better, which is, as you guys probably know, there's a roadmap that's going to take our input so forth, and ultimately turn into some decisions on programming. So we're actually going to hear about the roadmap, not just the mod, but the roadmap too. So this is a treat. I don't think anybody has heard this yet, right?
No, I don't think this is, you guys are the first ones. And so this is the initial, some of the initial discussion that will be leading up to the roadmap that will go to the board in September for item number 3, and for the log recommendations. And so I'll turn it over to John for that. And yeah, you guys are the first ones hearing about those as well. So you heard it first.
Great. Well, that was a nice build-up. So my name is John Supp. I am the account services manager. It's great to see you all again. Just a little bit of background. We work with the member agency working group monthly, but we meet with them on a much broader array of topics than just programs. So they see insights in policy, operations, regulatory. So they sort of have a much broader engagement with us. Also, many of the cities have their own climate action plans, as mentioned before, but some of them don't. And then also the cities themselves are very different. So some cities are much more residential, some are much more commercial, some have more multifamily, some are more single family. So they have a very different lens, and that was one of the reasons why we really needed that input, right? To really see what is their lens and what are their priorities, and then how do we make sure those get incorporated. I think one of the best things we saw out of this process is there is a bit of overlap. And I think there's some good overlap in between what your recommendations were and what some of theirs were. And then we also saw a few things that weren't, and that's okay. And that's exactly what we wanted to see. So we gave them a long lead up. We gave them sort of a loose framework. We did not have the same guiding principles that you all put together. We really put a very lightweight framework that said, give us some market segments, give us some potential goals. What would you kind of like to see happen in the short run, and what would you like to see happen in the longer term? So what we see here is a summary of the results. A couple of caveats: not all cities submitted information. That's okay. 2, when the cities did submit the information, they had their own prioritization. So city A might have very heavily said, we need multi-unit dwelling impacts. Well, that's for that city. Other cities may have had nothing about that because some cities have very few units within the multifamily space. So we got the city's individual priorities, what were their priorities and how did they see it? And then what we're looking at here is when we got together and reviewed the individual cities' priorities, they all looked at them collectively and said, wow, this is what we all think looks best overall. So we have 2 different views of theirs. What are the individual cities' priorities? And then as a group, what do their priorities look like? So Amy's got both of those, and we'll be able to sort of tease both of those into the ultimate roadmap. So we did that in July. I think you can see a couple things that pop up really quickly. If we look at their top 2 priorities, sort of no big surprise, they mirror sort of their own responsibilities, their own competencies, things that they think about a lot, which would be building codes. That's huge for them. And then the municipal building stock, also huge for them. And that's also huge for all of us, right? I mean, these cities really helped get us here, like you all did. So not a big surprise there. Second thing we saw were heavy emphasis on electric vehicles, but a little bit broader than just how do we get more of them. One of their big interests was, what is the actual infrastructure required for this, right? Where's the public charging? How much private charging? What about the home charging? What's our role as a city within that in order to make that happen? How do you monetize electric public charging? How do you not monetize it? Right? Is there some other way? So that was sort of a bigger, broader look at the EV side. I thought that was pretty important under the readiness plan. They did specifically say, look, they looked at the EV market space and said probably the least likely to adopt EVs right now is in the multi-unit dwelling space. So they sort of leapfrogged that to the top of the list and said, hey, we got to look at the hardest thing and let's figure out a way to get the hardest thing going. And that's, again, it's a prioritization. One lens might be, let's work with the market segment that's going great and make it go even better. The other one is, well, let's take a market segment that's not doing anything and let's make it do something. And that's really what this recommendation is about. I think no surprise, heat pumps showed up. That obviously was a big driver in us applying for the grant. So it resurfaced here that that's a really specific technology they want to get some traction with. They mirrored something that you all recommended in a slightly different way, was having a resource center, coaching. It's similar enough so that residential customers have some way, some body they can talk to about how to move forward with this. Whether it's that sort of one-stop shop concept, whether it's a concierge concept, that was definitely one of their bigger priorities. And then finally, I'm surprised it wasn't on your list, which is the how to convert waste to fuel. So didn't see that on the residential recommendations, kind of shocked by that. But yeah, this is an interesting concept, which
I have
is
a
take.
question here.
Yeah.
Sorry, complete your thought and then I'll
Sure.
ask the question.
Yeah, so the idea was to take organic waste and not just capture the methane for burning. In fact, that wasn't it at all. It was to process the waste such that it could be converted into hydrogen for use in a fuel cell. And then the remaining carbon organic matter would be utilized for something else, whether it's fertilizer or whether it's for actually building blocks for, roads or pavement and whatnot. So very different than just capture methane, burn it.
That's where my question was. Why specific to hydrogen, not just saying generically use organic waste to produce power?
Right, so I think that the reason for not wanting to just capture the methane specifically for burning was related to carbon emissions. So by converting to hydrogen and using the fuel cell, the idea is you would actually have a low or no carbon fuel or emission during the conversion to energy. Right? And the carbon itself would be captured, sequestered, or otherwise used rather than being released in the atmosphere through combustion.
I don't know enough about this technology piece of it, but so does this mean that in this process there is no methane produced?
Correct. Well, or if the methane is produced, it's converted before it's utilized. So it might actually end up as methane in the capture process, but then the carbon would be split out of methane so that the hydrogen would be utilized. I think this is still a pretty early technology, so there's a lot more research to be done on this one. But it ended up getting a lot of interest from the cities because, again, as we're thinking about their responsibility in this, waste, right? Management of waste is definitely within their overall sustainability, whereas looking at it from either the business perspective or the residential perspective, you're not really responsible. You're responsible for paying for it, but you're not responsible for making sure it happens. So that's definitely sort of how it got introduced by them. Yes.
I'm surprised that there's nothing on energy storage. They didn't come up with that. Can you comment?
So there are some there's a longer list of recommendations than what made the priorities, right? So these are the top, 8 or so.
I'll say it differently. I'm surprised that didn't get one of the top priorities.
So, I don't know that, I think that the best thing that we're looking for at this point are the inputs from people. And then ultimately then we do is take those inputs to make them into priorities for our roadmap. So whether it came up through you all or through staff or through the cities or through businesses, it's going to end up on the priority list somewhere. But yeah. So again, this is not a directive that the only thing we're going to be working on are within these subject areas. But yeah. So I'm not too surprised. So then we looked at a different group. It's a little bit hard to read, but we searched all of the recommendations they gave. And just sort of said, look, let's create a word cloud of it, see sort of what the priorities were. I think you can kind of see a little bit about where the priorities were between electric vehicles, greenhouse gases, codes, municipal, right? There's sort of that general flavor around it. Okay.
Question? Before you leave this one, so I know the grant is for heat pumps in existing residences, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And then we had a really good discussion 2 meetings ago about, that space or that domain versus new construction or retrofit and difficulties in those spaces. So here, that seems pretty specific, and I guess I'm just checking to see that whether that's really what the model meant, as distinct from, for example, heat pumps for new construction or heat pumps for major retrofits where you're taking out everything in the building.
Right. So this might have been a priority that was sort of self-reinforced by the recommendation for us to pursue the grant. But if we looked at the larger recommendation list, there were many that fit in the general electrical code, all electrification, new construction, and so on. So there definitely is support for this beyond just the existing building space.
Yeah, I think to that point, it's really the first two bullet points where new construction is accounted for in this list.
But I think what also happens, and again, I think this is going to come down to how we decide what we value and what we're contributing, right? So it is very likely that from a scale and cost effectiveness standpoint, new construction is actually the smarter, more prudent, more cost-effective way of going about making impact. On the other hand, if we say, look, the value of our operation is to actually tackle the harder things within a society, then it's figure out a way to get a cost-effective way to work on existing building space, where it's less cost-effective, it's going to be lower scale impact, but it's actually just a lot harder. And that's where this organization is valued. So I think these are some of those
So I guess
decisions we're going
that's
to work
my
on.
question is, what is the log in that third to last bullet? Is the log saying the second thing? I know what you just said, and I agree with it, but is that what they're saying, or did they really talk about it?
I don't think it wasn't really come up specifically in that regard. But I think if we looked at all of their emphasis on new construction and building codes, it's clear that they sort of expect that the heat pumps are going to be part of new construction in the very short near term, and that there is going to need to be actually a longer term fix for the existing building stock. James?
I think some of what we're seeing, the natural inclination from their perspective, the municipalities and member agencies, they know that they can deal with the new construction, the codes, so they're thinking of it from a very practical perspective, from their perspective, on what they can do, and what can SVCE do to help coordinate or help them across, for those types of things that they can do, is how can SVCE help the member agencies better coordinate those new construction, those things that they actually have more control over. So I think, and I think it also goes to the storage aspect, is that because storage isn't yet a practical thing that they know that they can work on, that it probably just doesn't come up as much as we might be interested in it. So it's just reflecting that perspective and what they think they can practically do. Do they think practically about what they have control over and what they don't?
I think the other part of it is too is that, stationary storage is definitely one particular component of the overall storage, whereas heat pumps themselves, and of course their big emphasis on EVs. My battery pack is 5 times larger than a Tesla Powerwall 2, right, in my car. So I think even if we don't think of this right now in the space of storage, like a battery backup, I think the market is going to be moving to figure out a better way to leverage those mobile battery banks that are in our vehicles to do better integration with the homes and businesses. So we'll see where that goes. But I definitely think, I heard from the cities, we are definitely working on codes, which is going to clip off, right, the new heat pumps, but that's still going to leave us 250,000 natural gas water heaters. So something's going to have to happen to flush those out of the system faster than their natural attrition rate.
Just a comment on the hydrogen fuel. We're already using the methane direct to power our plants, the water pollution control plants and so forth. So is the hydrogen fuel cell then powered, you gather the methane and you convert it to something else, is that what you're saying? And then that goes to make the hydrogen? Or you're splitting atoms or what?
Yeah. Personally, I'm not just splitting atoms. It's a great question. I think we have to shelve the technological details on this one. This was a recommendation based on some knowledge of some people within the working group. So there's a little more detail that has to be teased out of this one. But
Yeah, I really agree though that to make any energy of any type from organic waste is really.
Yeah, that was my thought too.
Yeah, that was the.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to use organic waste to produce power. It just seems curious that they are specifying for hydrogen fuel cell, that's all.
Well, I think the key for that was the way that they knew they could do it without combusting and adding carbon back into the atmosphere. Because if we just take methane and burn it, right, the carbon still emits back in the atmosphere. So if there's a different way that we could do it without combusting, I think that was their focus. How do we do waste in a way that's carbon free? Yes.
I know we've got to move forward, but I was wondering where the log was in terms of all electric building codes and being able to accelerate certain applications and moving to the top of the stack, because that was one of the things that we had talked about, you know, and something that could be implemented on a municipality by municipality basis fairly easily.
Right.
And were they receptive to that, or were they, like, is there a place for that? I'm kind of wondering.
So I'll start with the what. The what is all electric. 100% in agreement in the cities that all electric new building code is the direction to go.
Okay.
Then we get the question of how are we going to approach it. And so the specific discussion right here about accelerating applications is one way that one lever we can pull to do it.
Yeah.
This recommendation at this point was not at that detail. There might be some other ways to accelerate it as well, and I think those are the things that we're going to be.
Right. So if you think of EVs and getting permitted for an EV charging station for multi-unit, like were they thinking along those lines at all, or was that too detailed for them?
Again, the hows were not really. There was not a lot of emphasis on exactly how they wanted to get these done, but rather they were going to turn that over to the larger thought pool, the larger smarts. The larger smarts right here.
So that's an opportunity for us if we think that's a good thing.
Sunnydale, for example, slightly related, already has a expanded square footage opportunity if you meet green building standards. So that might be able to transition to an all-electric. That might also, so it's not speeding up the process, but it's allowing people to get more money out of the same property. This is more for like businesses or multifamily. But there could be a way that they could do a similar thing for residential. So again, I put that in the how category, how we can make this happen. Peter?
And do you feel like they were operating within a particular time frame? You know, did the, you know, we can implement these things before we have to do our next climate action plan update, that thinking or anything?
Yeah, so we asked them to give recommendations with two different time windows. So one is, what would they want to see happen in the next 2 to 3 years? And then what is the sort of future step after that? So something like, things like heat pumps for existing buildings, there was clear that they wanted to have like at least a short-term rebate for that. But long-term, they wanted to figure out some better way, like whether it's at sale of property, there's going to be some sort of conversion to all electric. Again, this didn't make the list, but we're just talking about sort of how that could have happened. So we asked them, would you want to see short-term or would you want to see long-term?
So this is a mix of short-term and long-term. It's not just short-term.
So these all had short-term components to it, and then also had long-term components to it. So every single thing they put up there had a short and a long-term. So what you're seeing here is their priorities, regardless of whether it had large short-term and small long-term, or vice versa. So something like building codes. We could see something like a REACH code in the next couple of years for certain cities, so that's in the short term. But longer term, a REACH code still doesn't actually prevent natural gas from going in. It just have parallel options. So the long term was, how do we set it up so that you really just can't do gas during the new construction process? And that's different than a REACH code. So that was sort of the flavor of how these recommendations came out. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so thanks everyone so much for showing up. As Jeff pointed out, this is an incredibly rich group, and it is a lot, asking 2 hours of your time a month, so really appreciate you being here. And also love the discussion as well, and the questions you have about the law, and I look forward to continuing that discussion. One other thing, thanks Jeff for showing up and also helping to liaise with Monterey And another thing that we have in common, in addition to being on the Foothill and Danza Energy and Advisory Commission, is that my dad also wanted me to be an electrician. Like even when I was off in undergrad, he was saying how if you could get me into a great union, he wanted me to come back. I think he's over it now though. But
They never get over it.
you make it great. Still comes up at Christmas. But in any case, so this has been a great discussion on the MOG priorities, I'd love to dive in a bit more now on this high-level roadmap draft. So draft is in the title, and also it is included on every single one of my slides. So just so you guys know, this is very much in progress still. We have a number of different stakeholder groups that we're in the process of still getting feedback from. Of course, we have the CPAG, your recommendations, these discussions, and meetings set up. We have the MOG, but then there are also a number of other entities. So let's see here. All right, so just starting out kind of at a high level, this is SVCE's mission statement. So we were formed to reduce dependence on fossil fuels by providing carbon-free, affordable, and reliable electricity and innovative programs for the SVCE community. And so this decarbonization roadmap, this program's roadmap, is very much in the context of our overarching organizational mission. There has been a lot of progress to date. We have, the Green Start carbon-free default electricity supply option, in addition to the 100% electricity supply option, 100% renewable. As you know, we have the greenhouse gas emissions and energy asset baseline data, so that study was carried out, so we kind of know where we're starting from and kind of where the emissions are within our service territory. And then another programmatic initiative that has already been launched is the peak day pricing program for C&I customers. And so we do have that one, which was set into place fairly early on. So we're not starting from ground zero. And as you all know, over the past year, we have been both SVCE staff and the board and the CPAG was formed, and there have been a lot of different discussions about what the program landscape could look like here at SVCE. So they're just to, kind of emphasize that we've made a lot of progress already, SVCE's service territory, to reduce emissions. So this is from the emissions inventory. So we have around 14% reduction as of 2017 from 2015. So it's good to, celebrate. And this is because of the supply portfolio. And this is also with Milpitas only enrolled as of a half of a year. And so with the full enrollment of Milpitas, this number kind of goes up. And so as we all know, the remaining largest categories are the built environment and transportation regarding emissions reductions. So for key input, you guys are certainly a very key group. The CPAG, the member agency working group is another key group.
Thank you for listening us first.
This is probably the highlight of my month. I love meeting with you guys, but I also love meeting with the MOG. This is recorded. Can't get paid for this. But we also have a number of other different stakeholders that maybe don't have their own official advisory group, but are very important as a part of kind of the SVCE community. Or different community groups, of which many of you guys are already a part of, like Carbon-Free, Silicon Valley, et cetera. Our big C&I customers, so a really big important part of our customer base, and also have very innovative companies. There are a lot of opportunities to potentially partner with them in different ways. Academia, national labs, we want what we do here at SVCE to all of the enthusiasm and energy to be very much guided by the academic community and the national lab community, and what is the state of the art, and how can we press the envelope or push the envelope forward, and kind of how to deploy innovative programs that actually are adopted and impactful. And then, of course, disadvantaged low-income communities and clean energy practitioners, so people going through these processes of installing EV charging in multifamily homes and experiencing these delays. We want we want people to be able to come and work in Santa Clara County and, be able to install EV charging stations without a huge headache. And so these are key sources of input that we're still in the process of gathering feedback with. I mean, for some of them, they're more just individual meetings, like us actively reaching out to academics with expertise in certain areas, practitioners that have these experiences with the permitting system, with interconnection, things like that, in addition to the more official groups. So for the roadmap, I kind of expanded it to be not just a roadmap, but to be a strategy and a roadmap. And so there will presumably be a catchier title at some point, hopefully before mid-September. But I wanted to kind of take a step back and first look at what is, we have a mission as SVCE, but then also we can develop a specific strategy around how to approach programs, how to decide what sort of resources we want to spend and how we should be spending those resources relative to competing priorities. And so this is like a level up from a lot of the recommendations and discussions that we've been having. So I'd love to kind of run this by you. So, well, first of all, we know that we have a number of different local, state, and international emissions goals. We also have already in our strategic plan a 2021 goal to reduce emissions by 30% relative to 2015 by 2021. And throughout this process, the roadmap process, we may also be proposing to the board to set a 2025 goal, a 2030 goal, potentially. And all of these goals you can kind of overlay into an emissions trajectory. And so right now, this is, again, notice the draft statement at the bottom. So this is an analysis in progress. So basically we have the emissions inventory data, but what we're in the process of defining is what is our business as usual. And so if we weren't to do anything else, what would our emissions look like over the coming decades? And then, if we were to do X, Y, and Z, how might that trajectory change? So I think it's very important as community and very important as our board. They want to know kind of what impact they could have and what's required to have the impact they want to have. And so this analysis is in progress. So it will be at least a draft version as a part of the high-level roadmap that goes to the board in September. And then in addition to overlaying that business as usual, we have all of these other goals. A lot of the municipal agencies have their city goals in addition to state goals, in addition to global goals.
Quick question here. Technical question since you were talking technically. So the 2 degree impact, right, global average, do we know what that means in terms of the 1990 emissions and where we need to be?
So that would be a part of kind of this analysis.
Okay,
I mean, basically, it's very similar to the reducing, what's often referred to as the science-based emission reduction target of reducing 80% by 2025 relative to 1990. So it's very much in line with that. I'm not sure exactly what it is for.
Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to figure out if these 40, 50, 80% reductions were motivated by that 2 degree or it was just.
I think the 40 and 80% it is motivated by the IPCC kind of studies on what sort of emission reductions are required. I can't remember if it was specifically for a 2% target, 2 degree Celsius target or not. But so I also need to refresh my memory on that.
Yeah, I had almost the exact same question, but you talk about the SVCE emissions trajectory, and we're talking about, baseline 1990, which is a while ago, and we have emission results so far, and so I guess my suggestion would be, show the trajectory. Let's see, what do these numbers mean relative to where we've been? It's a great question. I would love to know the answer. We throw these numbers around, 50 by 30 and whatever, there's these slogans, but how does that relate to, doing what we need to get to that 2%, 2 degrees? And I know you maybe don't have the answer offhand, but you can't look at this slide and not want to see a graph.
Yeah, I know.
It's a draft.
Yeah, it's a draft. I promise you there will be drafts.
Data that all
September meeting.
Just one quick comment on that. If you look at the state's, I think it comes out of the California Air Resources Board, they have a graph that shows what does it look like for the state to get from 1990 to 2020, and it's a line with a gentle slope, so it's kind of not hard, and then it drops like a rock, and it just gives you an indication through that graph, that we'll see again here, that we're getting into the harder steps.
Which is good to know.
And it's also a lot easier to reduce emissions when you have a recession. You know, unfortunately, we had a recession, but like to actually have a very vibrant economy while reducing emissions, that kind of presents additional stress. And so, it's so dependent on kind of these macro factors as well. Okay, so going into kind of the overarching strategy. So as we know, the emissions inventory, and this is pretty much every single regional, state, or national sort of decarbonization study. There are these primary buckets of emissions that would need to be kind of addressed to achieve decarbonization. The first one being power supply, which of course a lot of emissions associated with electricity, more so in other parts of the country now, less so with SVCE. And so we have a default rate that's GHG free or quarter pound per kilowatt hour. And so in that case, we've kind of taken care of that part of it, but now the next step is transitioning the built environment and mobility to actually be using that clean electricity. And so that's kind of the standard process for achieving decarbonization, where electricity really is the cornerstone. But then, of course, in all of this is grid integration. And I know that this group has had a number of different discussions about the dot curve. Like the power supply, we have these resources, we're signing these PPAs, these power purchase agreements to bring large-scale new renewables online. But in order to ensure that they're effectively integrated into the grid, we need to increase demand-side flexibility. And so grid integration really touches on all of this. And so if we're going to electrify transportation, these are really, really large loads. If you're going to purchase an electric car and install a charger, that can easily double a household load. Of course, it depends on your household. And so how are we going to do that in a way that's not breaking things? And the same with the built environment. If we want all of our homes, how are we going to kind of control and manage those new loads to ensure that not only is it not a detriment, but it's an asset to the larger grid?
It's a risk of asking a really arcane, but I think important question. So as you develop this strategy and prioritize things within the strategy, are you going to infuse the thinking with the clean net short, or continue with annual, it's all fine, carbon?
Yeah, so it's a good question, for sure. So there are a variety of, as I'm sure many in the room know, if not all of you, there are a variety of different ways you can account for GHG emissions, and also there are a variety of different state agencies that account for them differently, all of which we're regulated by. And so you're exactly right. The way that the ARB, the Air Resources Board, typically kind of counts things that are clean, it is on this annual basis, but we know that there are time-dependent emissions. And so to answer your question, we aren't treating it as if everything is fine, but it kind of fits a bit more in the grid integration category, and also the prospective development of different types of retail rates. It could also be developing a specific rate product that's a load-following rate product. So we haven't, we're not even running it. The short answer to the question. Okay, and so then there are a few kind of different guiding principles, one of which is for how to prioritize different activities. And so from the CPAG feedback and from the MOG feedback and from the feedback from various staff members and the other stakeholders that we mentioned, things have been kind of crystallizing around these 5 different principles. First, customer and community value. And I see this as, CPAG has a lot of influence on this one being kind of front and center. In the last 2 meetings at least, there were multiple people when we were looking at these rebate programs for heat pump water heater retrofits and asking, is this adoption rate, like, is that it? Is that how many heat pumps we can expect to get in the coming couple years? And I think it really kind of goes back to, are we providing customers and community the value that they would need to actually be able to electrify? And so that's one kind of principle. Emissions impact, I mean, our entire organizational mission is centered around decarbonization. But of course, there are different sources of carbon, and do we want to spend, 90% of our program funds on switching to induction stoves that account for a very small fraction? Probably not. And in addition, scalable and transferable is key, and it also relates very much, I think, to customer and community value. You can expect programs that are providing that value to be more scalable and transferable, but we want to be able to bend the carbon curve. That's the entire aspiration of the organization. You can't do that unless you have scalable and transferable actions. And then also we are, as you know, a government agency, equity and service. We have a diverse customer base, diverse member agencies, and so that's an important consideration that needs to be integrated into the discussion of different program initiatives. And then there are also some core things that could fall under the realm of being just a core role for SVCE. And following from the last CPAG meeting, for instance, there was some discussion about the PG&E energy efficiency programs and whether SVCE, like what role should we have in energy efficiency. And I think a lot of the discussion was about, well, we have the ability to be a central point of contact of education for customers and the community, and to be able to kind of promote the programs that exist. And so that could be kind of fall within the realm of being a core role for SVCE. And in the latter part of the meeting, Sergio will go over more details on kind of what that may look like for the customer, so-called customer resources center. Well, I guess I can go through a couple more slides on the strategy, and then maybe I can turn it over to you to hear kind of your thoughts on it. I recognize that we're getting low on time here, and I know that Sergio's prepared a lot for the latter part of the meeting, so I'll just kind of go quickly to the next few slides. So just another aspect of the strategy is how we want to approach programs, or how we want to approach decarbonization. And these were kind of three ways in which we thought needed to be integrated into everything that we're doing. One of them being using data-based decision-making. Whether it's an outcome we want to see or not, we want to be able to measure the programs that are put in place and measure their impact, and be able to say what sort of impact they've had. If you don't measure it, you don't manage it, or you can't manage it, right? Embracing innovation and continuous improvement, very Silicon Valley-esque. We want to do things differently. I think if we were to go the route of a traditional utility in the way that we set up programs, we would expect the traditional utility results. If you want a different result, you have to go about things a different way. And then also leveraging strategic partnerships. We have some amazing academic institutions, national labs in this area, just amazing companies, community groups, and so leveraging partnerships across kind of the spectrum of these different activities we see is very key for helping to move things forward. And then I'll say just a couple words on this, and then turn it over to you guys for your feedback. So just the types of actions, like based on the CPAG feedback and the log feedback and other feedback, most of the types of activities that are on the table kind of fall within these 5 different categories. And for any specific program, it will have elements of each one of these, most likely. But one of them is retail products and services, like what is the customer-facing product or service that they would be procuring. Education and outreach is very key, and so there are going to be some actions very devoted to helping to raise the education level of customers on what it means to, like how they can reduce their carbon footprint. Public policy, and this includes not just state policy, local policy, various barriers that may not fall under the public policy front or the education and outreach front, but can fall within this category of market transformation. So helping to reduce barriers for financing, for instance, could be one example of something that falls within the market transformation. Or working with, providing input to manufacturers of appliances to let them know what sort of product specifications we think are needed in order to really deploy heat pump water meters broadly. And then there's also kind of research and development type activities, and so we're not going to be doing experiments ourselves, so to speak. I mean, maybe some A/B testing, but we anticipate, partnering with research institutions, academic institutions. There are a lot of startups in this area. If they're seeking CEC funding or Department of Energy funding, and they need a support letter because they have a product that they think can be very influential, and it fits in with our strategy, and we think if they achieve these techno-economic metrics, then yeah, we think it's going to be a game changer. That's a pretty low, that's a pretty small lift for an SVCE that can have a very significant impact in helping these startups, get to an MVP or get to something further along. Okay, so that kind of falls within the strategy component, and then I have. Okay, so I just have 3 more slides. So the first, I'd love to get your feedback on prioritization, approach, and actions. And if you'd like me to spend more time, it's really in the program roadmap that you can see more of the direct connections to a lot of the CPAG output. But your fingerprints are all over this, and so if you want me to spend some more time kind of articulating that, I'm happy to do that. Depends on what you guys think would be valuable.
Well, I guess maybe in terms of the remainder of the agenda, we're almost half done. And one of the things that I really want to do is do a breakout session to some extent pick up our discussion from last time. It's going to feed into what Sarah Jo's going to talk about. So I actually want to do that before you talk. What I'm looking for is people's input on what can we do to make these customer-facing programs, how to achieve better uptake than what you heard about last time. What do you think is missing, or is it fine? Should we just do it the way it's been done? And we want to do breakout sessions to get as many ideas as possible. So that's going to take a little time. And then we should probably discuss this too. And then we also need to talk about a discussion about whether we like, how we feel about having this committee continue past September, which was sort of what we signed up for. And so I guess would people like to have this marinate, or do you have things that are thoughts that are running that you would like to share right now, or should we maybe get lunch and do our breakout, and then we can have a group discussion on all those topics? I'm open to suggestions. I just want to make sure we don't lose the breakout this week. That's the key thing.
So all the strategy stuff sounds great to me. I'm not sure I really need any more discussion on the strategy per se. What's the breakout session? What would be the goal of the breakout session, and what's the topic?
Okay, so basically, last time we talked about some specific things that are out there that look like electricity monitoring, that look like electricity bill explorer, the two top things that we identified as initiatives that we care about. And I would say, in my mind, they're all kind of, well, let's just say this, I don't have my opinion numbers, but the uptake was small. And actually, the awareness was relatively high in this group, being between a third and a half had heard of most of these things. And so the purpose, and the other thing is that SVCE separately has adopted as part of its strategic plan to have what you call a customer resource center. So I see a linkage there between these things that we said were important and a thing that SVCE is going to do, has decided to do. And so the breakout topics would be, or is, what could be done with these two initiatives that we identified, and looking at things that are out there now that have seem pretty tepid uptake. How could this be repackaged, to use John's term, or recast, or better publicized? You know, what's it gonna take to go from 1% uptake to 10% or 20 or 30% or 100% uptake? Or do we really want to do these things and expect to have, 1 or 2% of customers even be aware of it? So that's the breakout. And hopefully we get there, about 4 different groups with their ideas. I know you have ideas. And so, that's the breakout topic.
I think, I just had a quick question on the strategy, maybe comment. I think generally it looks very interesting, all good. Just a thought on the role of SVCE. I also like the insertion of embracing innovation and continuous improvement. You said that's a different line, but I think in general, every business today needs to do that anyway. The part that I think I'm wondering about is in the next slide that you have the research and development. And I think I'm a little, I don't know what the right word is, but I'm not sure that that is the right word I would use. I think if the idea is to provide support letters and so forth to global startups that are potentially coming up with new game-changing technology, I think that's great. But I wouldn't exactly call that research and development. So I think, and part of the reason why I kind of brought that up was because research and development in the true sense requires millions and millions of dollars. And I don't think SVCE has that kind of funding to really do research. So that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, and also unique, now that I'm, thinking through it with you, the example I mentioned could probably cast it under market transformation more as well. If it is more of an R&D project carried out by an academic institution, providing a support letter, I think it kind of gives the impression of the wrong emphasis. Thanks for that.
I just have a couple comments on the 2 slides before this. And so, I mean, to your overall question, I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on this, but maybe there's a few comments like what we've been providing, and we can be done with this and then let it marinate for longer. So a couple things that come to mind, it may be underneath the umbrella of core role for SVCE, but I've always considered community choice energy agencies as having this unique characteristic of being able to connect the local member jurisdictions in a way that nobody else can. So wherever that can be best fit, I think maybe under the core role for SVCE is how to coordinate across the member jurisdictions, like you're already doing, but it needs to be explicit that that's actually one of the unique values of the CCPs that, with my old PG&E hat on, we couldn't do. The other thing is to prioritize also by filling gaps of where there isn't something already being offered. Filling gaps or enhancing what PG&E or others are already doing. I don't know where that fits, but that seems to be another way to prioritize, that it's not clear it's in here. I mean, it may be in the first one, providing value. Providing value, you don't want to duplicate what someone else is already doing if it's good enough. You either want to enhance what someone else is doing or filling in gaps, and therefore you're adding value. So that can fit in number one.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it would be good to articulate exactly or more precisely, kind of what's we have in mind, and what is the result of this CPAG and about. What does it mean what are the core roles that we have? And so if it's not in the September version to the board, it should definitely be in the December filled out version to actually call those things out. I'm not sure exactly, like you said, I'm not sure exactly where the fill the gap kind of part would go, but it definitely has to be in there somewhere.
Maybe we can give you feedback sort of one-on-one.
Yeah, that's
and then, now that we've seen it, we put it into context, I think that would be expeditious.
That's great. And since we only have an hour, I'm happy to turn it back over to Peter, and we can have any conversations offline and then discover where to go from there.
Okay, so let's do this. Don't jump up yet. Get lunch, please self-organize into groups of 4-ish. I think we're going to be 3 or 4. And then again, maybe you might have a slide, or you go down and see more in the deck, you put up the slide of how you use the technology program experience, you put it up. So if you're thinking about, and this really comes from a comment that's on in the last meeting. And if these are offerings that are out there that are sort of like the initiatives that we identified, residential electricity monitoring, electricity bill explorer, largely unknown, I would say successful. And so, and then if you sort of imagine this within a customer, what's the term you use?
The resource center?
Yes, customer resource center, which could be an online thing, it could be physical, it could be whatever, but it's a customer experience thing. And so the question is, what should we do differently to have this be something that many customers are aware of and find valuable? And, doing things the way it's done, as Amy says, we don't have to do it quick. And we're all customers, so your point of view is as valuable as any. So get lunch, self-organize, and then come up with some ideas, appoint a spokesperson, and we'll reconvene in a little while and collect those ideas. And then you can hear from us what we should do, and then you're going to tell us what we're going to do.
Do you want us at the time? Like, I think it'd be good to say, like, at this time we'll end the breakout.
Okay, so I would say half an hour
Yeah,
would
so
be max.
12:30, yeah, max, 12:30. Okay, so get lunch, eat and talk. So are you guys ready to go?
Yep.
All right, we're going to go ahead. And the question is, how do we have
Right.
things like these draw people to an SVCE resource center and feel it was a great experience and learned a lot and stand on to more involved things like beneficial education and whatever, so go ahead.
So our group, I think we started at maybe at a more foundational level of trying to increase knowledge about SVCE itself. So we all kind of agreed that we remember getting a single mailer about SVCE, and so we signed up. But if uptake of SVCE or opting out is only 4% to 5% total, that means probably 80 to 90% of the people that are not part of SVCE don't even realize that they're part of it. So in order to have people involved in these programs, they would need to be more involved or more knowledgeable of the fact that the organization of SVCE itself exists. So a couple ideas that we had were, since when you pay your bill, you still have PG&E, you go to the PG&E website, or you get a PG&E bill in the mail, including information there about the fact that you are within the SVCE jurisdiction, so that people become more aware of that as how they're actually getting their power, and then sort of move into getting them involved in participating in these types of programs. And also for new accounts, when you set up an account with PG&E, then say, hey, you're actually getting your energy from SVCE, and here's opportunities that you can take to be more knowledgeable about your energy usage and potentially then reduce it to also then save money. So, fundamentally increase knowledge about SVCE so that people are more aware that these types of programs exist.
Oh, yeah. I think we have one quick question, which is like, do we know what percentage of customers get their bills e-bill versus paper? That'd be useful information.
It's, I need to check into the latest numbers here, but last we checked was on the order of 40 to 50%. Does sound about right? Yeah, so we actually are going to be doing some surveying, using some of that email, some of the email addresses that we have. I wish I could rewind exactly what you said, because there's been a motivation for it. We know to advance electrification and decarbonization in general, there needs to be awareness, there needs to
John, has there been some thought to, sort of like an opt-out, but you get an e-bill unless you opt out for paper? Because you can do so much more, pushing it out that way, because I don't know how other people look at their paper bills, but, you look at how much you owe and the rest of the stuff goes in the trash.
I'm sorry, can you ask the question?
What I'm saying is some of the things that to get people more in tune with it would be to have all billing by e-bill unless you opt out. See what I mean? So then you're dealing with fewer paper bills. I know you have that. For those that are not and don't have the ability, you have to have paper bills in some form. But it seems like that would be one way to get people more to go to electric bills or e-bills more.
Yeah, interesting idea. Would have to be worked with PG&E, who's the billing.
PG&E already tries to do as much as they can of that, and then they've gotten to where they've gotten with 40 or 50%. The flip side of that is actually home energy analytics has seen very effective results from a past program in Mountain View with paper bills because the bill inserts are highly visible. So half of the signups in Mountain View in the past program from 2010 to 14 were from bill inserts, but hard copy bill inserts. The PG&E bill, the inserts are a separate file that nobody looks at. So more electronic bills is good for saving trees, but it actually is harder to do out.
So it sounds like your group thought that the primary, maybe really the only touch point, once people signed up, is the bill.
Yeah, I mean, even then it's still difficult because, I get my email and I can click and say, oh, it looks like a reasonable amount, I think that's right, and then that's about it.
Well, I think it would be, the other thing you're saying is that essentially we would be co-marketing with PG&E.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I really like that your group came up with the idea of who Silicon Valley Clean Energy is. There is still to this day, we do solar, we talk to our customers and go, okay, so are you getting billed direct with PG&E or so? Have no idea. They don't know who is the provider. So I think the awareness to start with that basic premise, here's who we are again, we took over this territory, it's a community thing, that's a great starting point again, because there's still so much confusion in the marketplace on who is providing the electricity, who do I pay, and a lot of time it is Silicon Valley, go, it's PG&E, and we're looking, no, it's Silicon Valley Clean Energy, it's like, oh, I remember something about that, but I don't know, I mean, there's still confusion.
Do you guys think that to make customer resource center, this SVCE branded word, that ultimately thinking very long term, SVCE has to be the billet?
It certainly helped if you got something in the mail that said, so something you had to, we were talking about, if you go to pay your electricity bill, you go to the PG&E website, but it's Silicon Valley Clean Energy. There's no forced interaction with SVCE at all.
Forced, that's a great term.
Sometimes it's one of those reasons we succeeded, right? I mean, like, the fact that people got switched, without any interaction to this default, which is better, is the reason why we have, like, if we sent a letter that said, mail this back to switch to, carbon-free energy, then we'd have a 2%, or something like that, adoption rate, instead of 90-something. So we have to also, if we increase interaction, we have to understand that there's the possibility that we'll have more opt-outs. Like people will go, oh wait, I didn't know I was doing this. I don't want this.
But it could go the other way, because I think what you were saying, the few people who did bother to opt out, a lot of the driver was that they were worried about a new provider and the reliability and all that. So you could say, hey, we've been doing this for a little while, but have you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, I think where we have conversations, I think that works well. What we haven't seen, just the changing rates, a mass re-enrollment. Like even with the huge savings that materialized in April, that wasn't followed with an automatic boost in re-enrollments, right? So there's definitely a messaging gap, and I think, forced interaction, or, we are a little behind the curve a bit, right? Customers don't really know.
Okay, anything more? Move on, next group. Thank you. It was worth having this exercise just for that. So you guys have a spoke first?
Okay, so first we kind of talked about identifying, maybe we need to identify some groups that would be the beginning. So we talked about, there's like 3 groups that stood out in our mind that would be interested and perhaps be motivated to do something. First, the people that are like economically disadvantaged, because across the board in this particular arena as well, we all represent different communities, and the communities drastically are different from, say, Gilroy to Los Altos, Gilroy to Sunnyvale. We have like, we have segments of our population in Gilroy that are kind of not the best statistics, in the county here. So there's a lot of challenges economically. So if we started like in our community with the people that maybe would be on the CARE program, they may be somebody that would right away say, wow, yeah, I do want to save. I'm already saving because I'm on CARE, but my money is really tight. So show me a way to save more energy. And I think those people groups would say, they would listen, they would probably be more receptive. The other one is people with.
So are you saying tailor the marketing approach based on who's in those tiers?
Correct.
Okay.
So second would be the high energy bills then. So now you've got consumers that have maybe over $200, $300 a month. Those are all known statistics through the utilities, so target them. And they could even be, the other one is like the ones that are on NEM. They're already mindful, about solar. They have high bills. So let's do a target some way, and that's, our next thing would be how to reach them. But let's, maybe we segment out those population groups and reach them the way they need to be reached with a message that would be appealing to them. And then, the third one are the environmentalists, the ones that really care about the environment. That may not be an economic situation, it may not be that they just want to save money, maybe they just really care about the environment. So how are you going to reach them? So there's a different message for the various audiences that have, specific points that they would want to reach them with. So we talked about, okay, so how do you reach them? And of course, the bill is probably the number one because everybody receives some kind of an invoice or an online. So then again, if that message were segmented to those particular population groups, perhaps there'd be more uptake. Because if I'm an environmentalist and I don't really care about economics right now, how to, save or reduce your carbon footprint is great for an environmentalist, but we're going to save you money and they don't even care. So if the message is tailored to the individual, key points, so that may be a way of doing it. And then in the cities, we think cities can play a real vital role in reaching out to these groups. So, the cities have boards and commissions that can, get that message out there. The other thing is through like chambers of commerce. Some of them have environmental committees. But the other biggest thing is through the chamber, you're dealing with businesses. I think in Gilroy we have about 700 business members in our community that are part of the Chamber of Commerce. Those are either individual businesses or businesses with hundreds of employees. If we can get messages out to them, they can get it out to their constituents. Then we've just amplified our outreach to whatever that message would be. And again, and then if there are like Sierra groups was mentioned and different environmental groups, they could be proponents of this message. Let's electrify, let's engage in this. And then it would have to be where the resource center would be so easy to reach. So that would be the other thing. So here's the message. If you want to say to call the resource center or do this or whatever that action item is going to be, make it so easy. What was that?
The click-through.
Yeah, click through now, calm now, go green. Okay, so CARE, save money, or high bills, save, whatever that message is. It's all go to the same place, but it's the attraction to get people to go to the resource center. So that was kind of it.
If I can add a couple things.
economic audiences, probably the bill is a great channel to reach them, because that's when, money is foremost in their mind. For environmentalists, you guys probably don't have a database of environmentalists, but what you might be able to do would be partner with the Sierra Club. Would you be willing to outreach to your members and promote this thing on behalf of Silicon Valley Clean Energy? Here's something that your members can do, a step they can take in order to act on their values. We also talked about like seniors and people with fixed incomes. And there's probably outreach that you could do like at City Senior Center, something like that. You are another audience that is likely to be, have economic concerns. And so here's how we'll run something at your senior center to help them see how they can, live within their means. So, trying to come up with, identify discrete audiences who are likely to be more receptive and then reach them through a channel where they will respond.
So I mentioned the survey we're doing. A big purpose of the survey is to help do exactly what you're saying, which is to help segment our customer base. And maybe you're familiar with the term personas, but to identify kind of archetypical customers. Our theory so far is that there are 5 personas among residential customers. And you get basically them all in your discussion. But maybe at a subsequent meeting, if there is a subsequent meeting, we could share what we've been learning on that front. But another great set of points there.
Do you have that information on the segmentation?
It is so rough draft, and we haven't even gotten survey information back yet to support it.
No, but do you have the? I'll deal with you. I'll follow up with you offline.
Anything else from the group?
I think we're good, unless, Sarah, did you have anything?
No, that's. Thank you. So you guys.
You want to say some things and then I can.
Yeah, you can let me summarize the discussion you had after that. So this is a good segue. We also kind of thought about this whole idea of segmentation. I'm glad you're using the persona. That's the latest product management lingo, right? So somebody has been using that, which is good, I think. And so, clearly there are, in terms of the billing, there are mailers, hard copy mailers, and then there are folks who own the online. And we don't know the percentage, it sounds like 60-40%. Based on the experience, looks like Kira had previously, the mailers seem to actually have a positive impact. So that's kind of interesting fact to know, but nonetheless, both either do a hard copy mailer inserts about information or do online email information and awareness becomes important, right? To begin with, what is SVCE? Do they even know about SVCE? So I think start there and then build the rapport from there on. The other thought we were having was about some kind of a town hall, fireside chat kind of discussion or not. Town halls, I think, some may say it's more of a one-way discussion, but maybe instead of calling it town hall, if we call it energy clinics, it sounds like was the term that previously they used, HEA and Actera, where they actually would solve people's problems right there and then. I think that brings more awareness, and anybody can come and, that information is provided. Then along the line of the city commissions and so forth, so maybe there is a need for each city to have a commission. Maybe if not as a form, maybe just a volunteers, right, who are focused on environmental issues and sustainability and so forth. So then through that process, create more awareness. The other idea being with Rotary clubs and Lions clubs, most cities tend to have them. I know San Jose has it and Sunnyvale has it, but I don't know what other cities might have some of these clubs, but that might be an avenue for information exchange. Neighborhood apps. So Nextdoor apps, for example, are very, very active. In my neighborhood, we are very, very active on Nextdoor app. And I think it's amazing how fast the information traverses across our neighborhood. I think we have like 400 or 500 houses in there. And it's all residential mostly. But I would say within like 5 minutes, virtually you see in people pinging in from all over which is very amazing. So it's very fast and very good way of. Now, how do we leverage that would be something to think about, but it could be, for example, just as an information, one-way information, or it could be like a sweepstakes. So we say, okay, if you join in and do blah, 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 you're going to get, so-and-so thermostat or whatever, a free upgrade or, I'm just throwing it. So, but the idea being that if there's some kind of a sweepstakes attached to this information, that's probably going to get more eyeballs than not. The other thing being advocacy for SVC, so it's kind of along the lines of that the bill, when the bill comes, it's really PG&E bill. And there's somewhere it will say SVCE, but that's not very visible. So you still think that you're a PG&E customer as opposed to the primary is really the SVCE. So I think now this is the marketing piece, right? So in the marketing sense, if SVCE starts to go out and starts to talk only, oh, this is who we are and so forth, some people will listen and some people may just tune out. Having a partnership with other agencies who are environmentally conscious agencies who don't have the name tag SVCE and they talk about SVCE, that will have also will have a lot of impact, especially on the folks who may be tuning out from SVCE itself. So that might be another way to increase the awareness for SVCE. I think I covered the question.
Yeah, just to add a little color to that, I think you covered it quite well. So some of the high-level perspective was we heard from Actera last meeting that their uptake, the results of getting people to sign up was a little lower and a little disappointing. I think part of that was that some of what Sandeep was mentioning, Actera started to do, but at the very end of their time frame for their program, the Green at Home program. So they did a Nest thermostat promotion that the city posted on Nextdoor, and that was the best Nextdoor post, but it was at the very end. And they did some bill inserts in the local Sunnyvale utility bill. So it doesn't have to be in a PG&E bill, it can be in a municipal member agency bill, or some don't have their own billing, like Cupertino, they have to work through ecology for their garbage bill. But just have an insert in the stack of bills that people deal with. They have PG&E bills there, and then there's another bill, and there's a bill insert inside of that. The social media that neighborhood apps. Sunnyvale did that in the Green at Home, but there's a lot more that can be done. So most of what happened with this Actera Green at Home Sunnyvale program was the city occasionally posting to the whole city. That there's a lot more richness and momentum that can be done if we work through, as Cindy was mentioning, the local city leaders and groups to really have a much broader campaign of local leaders and opinion leaders that are posting in their neighborhoods. It's coming from them, it's coming from customer testimonials, it's and they're commenting on what the city has posted. So Actera didn't get into this layering of really taking advantage of what these neighborhood apps can do and the power of it and getting other people involved. Adding on to that, SVCE could do ads on social media that then these conversations are happening in social media from the city, or member agencies, and from the local leaders and from happy customers, and then people see the ads in there as well. So then the social media will be much more effective with to use it for all of it's worth. The energy clinics. Actera did a lot of workshops where they were talking at people, and it was only near the end they figured out it was actually the city of Sunnyvale got them to shift. So Newport, or sustainability manager, said, well, why don't you try the more one-on-one approach to set up a table in a high-traffic area and promote it as an energy clinic. And promote it in advance, people come, they feel like they're getting much more one-on-one, but then you can rattle through it. You can connect with them better. So the energy clinic idea came, but came too late for them to get a lot of extra push and results. Getting data on high user targets from what we've done, it's those higher end, higher user targets from electricity and natural gas are very valuable in reducing energy and finding the right candidates to do fuel switching or electrification. with our targeting, we've identified high energy electricity users, and there were more than 10 times in terms of the number of savings, energy savings, as others. And I know, just heard that the residential program supervisor at PG&E is working with a consultant to start a project to analyze gas data for residential customers. So we're gonna be able to get some more natural gas data to identify how to segment and find those gas, because that's really where the opportunity is to reduce gas or fuel switch away from gas, where since our electricity is clean, we want to focus on the high gas targets. And we don't yet have them, but there's ways to do that, and there's some things in the works even at PG&E to do that. So there's just some additional color.
Okay, so anything else? Good, thank you. Really good notes. So last group.
Great. So the first thing I point out is we all observe this is there's no silver bullet for this. This is really hard. And the other thing is there's a lot of overlap with what you guys all were saying as well. So in the interest of time, I'll keep it fairly brief. We covered things we haven't covered already. So the one thing we emphasised was that if as much as we can have an auto enroll on this to make it an opt-out, then that's the best nudge we felt to get people to do. So for example, with the Bill Explorer, if the backroom kind of work has already been done on what a good bill would look like, or a cost-effective bill, or whatever measure we have already. We can send that out as a default kind of recommendation to each individual household or customer, and try and have it so that they don't have to ask for that. It happens automatically, so that they receive that without having to opt in. The other thing, we cover the same things that everybody else was talking about the shape messaging. We felt that some people were motivated by money, some people were motivated by carbon reduction or the environment. The other things we'd add though is some people are also motivated by things like the convenience and the quality of the experience they're having with their appliances or with their electricity usage as well. We're trying to think of a way to target those people as well in that segment. The other thing we talked about then was having really concrete case studies. So we're asking somebody to, a bit like we've had here, say we're asking somebody to install a new water heater, if we could have some kind of testimony from somebody who's done that already and walk through the process. So it could be online rather than necessarily a vocal one. To give people an understanding of how it would work in different steps, then I think that would help in the interaction as well. I think that was everything. Was there anything else that missed out?
What's that piece that I mentioned right at the end?
About data and using emails.
Oh yeah, so we had a question for staff. Since PG&E is the billing entity, they own the customer relationship and we don't. Can we, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, message our customers, which are the PG&E customers, directly, or is that a nightmare? And privacy policy issues and all that stuff?
No, we have to message them directly. We send lots of messages directly to customers.
By email? So we have access to those email
To
addresses?
the extent it exists. A
Oh,
lot of
okay.
their action is through mail, but if
Like
there's
hard copy mail, US mail.
Yeah.
But you can, isn't part of your question whether we as SVCE can message customers with content that's informed by their own consumption?
Yes, we could.
You have the data, right?
We do. We could, of course, they would have the ability to opt out of that.
Right.
And we're saying they were wanting it, but yes.
I think that was part of the discussion, I think may have been discussed previously. If you have the data and you go to a single family residence, you can say, well, here's your energy bill and here's a comparison with peers. If you want to figure out how to save energy or do an audit, click here kind of thing. Or for the person who wants to take the next step, and the first step being push out.
Yeah, another, just really great how synergistic these comments are, but yeah, another reason that we're doing this outbound survey is to really engage, establish an email channel, which, Brian, maybe your point, we haven't done yet. In fact, it really hasn't been done by CCAs. Could it be done? Yes. Does it have risk associated with it? Yes. Some people may say, who are you? And I want to opt out altogether. But
me, this is a lot of good stuff here. But this is kind of the one comment on, most of the comments have to do with how to reach people about these offerings, but this is one comment about the offering itself. And you know, it's true with the HDA as one example that almost all the information that the app needs, it already has. As soon as you give your credentials, all the rest of the information comes in from the internet and so forth. And so it would be possible, rather than saying, here, would you try this? You can say, did you know that, you know, your use is twice what a house your size typically is, or something like that. It could be proactive, just the way you described it. And I don't think it's ever marketed that way.
We send letters to our high energy targets with their electric idle load use plugged in for each household. So, and we're actually adding to that a calculation of how much of that, we calculate how many dollars does that cost them every year. So that idea is right on, and it's very effective.
One thing that just occurred to me was, James was talking earlier about social media and engagement there, and advertising there. Within our catchment area, we have a lot of social media influencers who are probably customers of Silicon Valley Clean Energy already. If we could engage them in some way, then they can engage with their followers as well and do the leveraging effect.
Okay, so we're going to fight over the last 2 minutes, and we need to talk about how people feel about having this committee continue. So I guess
We can either move this presentation to the next meeting, or I can be very brief.
I actually would prefer to move it because I don't think it should be brief. And I think with this kind of input, maybe, you know, some of these things might be useful to you. So, okay, so we'll agenda that for your next one. I think we have one more scheduled meeting. So then the question is, you know, how do people feel about, our term is through September, I believe.
End of September.
End of September, well, the September meeting, presumably. So, you know, do people feel, either speaking for themselves or speaking for the committee, that there's an interest in continuing and a reason to do so? Or are you guys pretty well done? And I'll kind of open it.
I can also provide a few comments like from a staff perspective, if that's helpful. You know, from our perspective, we know that you were kind of set up as a 9-month sort of deal, and you have a lot of other commitments. However, given this high-level roadmap is just going to the board in December, and there's going to be some work through December to get the more detailed roadmap, we would certainly really value you know, having a couple more CPAG meetings, but recognize you guys have other commitments. And then longer term, we're in the process of kind of looking at all of the different advisory groups that we currently have. I think, you know, from the board discussions in the past, they seem to be very keen on having potentially a more permanent group. And I know you guys were going to set up as a more temporary one. And so we'll be coming forward at some point to the board, probably in December, with some proposal of what an ongoing kind of advisory group could look like. And it may involve a lot of you guys if you wanted to kind of continue, but maybe that would be one that would be kind of longer terms, like longer standing advisory group. So that's kind of where we're.
And just for reference, Peninsula Clean Energy, they initially started with a temporary set period of time Citizens Advisory Committee. It was broader than programs, but it was about policies and so forth. And then they made it permanent. And it was at that time where, you know, the natural course of things is some members of that group decided to not continue because they couldn't make that longer term commitment, and then so they just replaced it. So it has been done. It happened at Peninsula Clean Energy. You know, it's the same time. It's at the same time. You know, this organization could consider whether or not should it just be about programs, or can it also be a broader scope to include other policy topics that may come up in the future, which is what I would suggest.
That's definitely one of the things that's being discussed.
So, kind of prompts some sort of discussion. I guess one question that I would ask people is it burdensome to, is this the kind of thing, we've got really good input and great people serving on this. Is it helpful in the short term, or are people motivated to be involved in SVCE and would like to continue?
So
say that I'm very open to continuing. I think that, wrapping up in September when the roadmap is continuing to be developed feels like, leaving the job before the mission's completed. So I'm definitely open.
Yeah, I would second the same. I think I had the same feeling that, September seemed a little premature to disband this group. Maybe some folks individually may not have been able to continue, but as a group, I think the group should definitely continue beyond September. And the other thought that comes across is this group has been in the so-called planning phase, right? And then the implementation phase comes. And this is where this whole idea of, okay, if one group plans and then during implementation there is no sort of input from that type of group, then something is going to give, something is not going to work, somewhere something is going to have a challenge. So it sounds like maybe the mission of the group might change from planning to maybe more implementation focused, but I think there should be I was talking about like a more permanent type of a group which kind of continues, because at the same time, even the mission and the strategies and so forth will evolve, and SVCE needs to have input from broad group like this to make sure that it's continuing in the path that it wants to continue.
I think I agree with the first two people who spoke. I think it's important to be able to stop when you think that the mission has been accomplished and there's no more to do. But if we haven't finished, then I think we should continue. I would think that if people here are not able to carry on, or not willing to carry on, it should always be possible to get somebody else appointed.
Is there anybody who has a view that this committee has really run its course?
Seems like we have more to talk about. We couldn't get through today. So.
My perspective would be the same but slightly different in that we actually made, or I don't know, I made a big commitment in terms of just my level of understanding of how community choice aggregation works. And like we went through I think we went through quite a learning curve. So to be able to take that learning and then move it forward, it may not be complete the mission, but it's to get to a realization to some milestones where someone in Monte Sereno says to me, so what do you do? Well, we had a number of meetings, but we didn't, do anything to actually say, here is what we helped to deliver. So maybe that's the mission, but it's what's the deliverable? What did you get done? So having made a big investment, I'm like, this, it's not a lot more to hit some milestones at the end of the year. So I'm in full support of that.
Any other comments since we're out of time? Very helpful. Kind of what I captured here is the people feel engaged and that this is a resource and the strategies are playing in. I don't have to worry about whether people are going to show up for the next meeting. It sounds like people will. And so we'll take that message to the board about there. And then I thought this last discussion, I don't know about you guys, but I thought a lot of really good things came out of it. So thank you all for that. And any other thoughts or before we adjourn? Okay, good. Thank you. See you again next Sunday.